But before we do get into a lot of the Q&A, let me just introduce ourselves and kind of set the game plan here. My name is Stephen Larsen. I lead our partnerships and ecosystem at Netlify. If you've heard this webinar series before, I am your host. And then joining me today is Sarah Guthals, who is the Director of Developer Relations at Sentry. She has her PhD in computer science, so we could call her Dr. Guthals, or I hear she goes by Dr. G.
Much easier to pronounce.
Would be appropriate. And she has a myriad of experience. If Sarah, you want to give a little bit more of an introduction yourself for the audience?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like Stephen said, I have my PhD in computer science and was lucky enough to be kind of a hipster in DevRel because I focused it all on education and how we can teach computer science better from people as young as 4 years old to professional developers looking to learn new tools, technologies, frameworks, whatever it might be. And yeah, I've written some books. I'm actually currently editing the GitHub for Dummies book that I published a few years ago. So some updates to that coming soon. I've taught at the university, formerly an engineering manager for the GitHub extensions into editors. And yeah, was DevRel at Microsoft, and now I lead DevRel here at Sentry. So really my passions have always been around how can I help empower developers to do what they want to do? Like, how can we as an industry, as people building tools, and as educators enable amazing things to happen?
That's so cool. On the books, does it say authored by Dr. G?
I have it say Sarah Guthals, PhD. But yeah, I do have I used to have a Learn with Dr. G show when I was at Microsoft. And yeah, I like to go into that brand a little bit. It's fun. It makes me feel cool. I'm like, Dr. G. Clearly, I'm very cool.
It is a very cool nickname for sure, and very appropriate as well. So yeah, all that hard work in your PhD, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of housekeeping things. Everyone is in a list only mode, so you're automatically muted. The session is being recorded, so we can distribute for everyone that hasn't and doesn't have the opportunity to attend today, or if you'd like to rewatch, you're so inclined, you may do so. We welcome your questions throughout. I mean, this is basically a fireside chat, so we have a series of questions that we're going to go through, but to cover different topics, but we definitely want to hear from the audience. So please drop any questions into the chat. We'll answer some of those real time, if as and when it makes sense, but also we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well.
Yeah, we'll be monitoring that Q&A tab. So please feel free to ask throughout.
And then last one, please respect our community code of conduct. So if you just go to jamstack.org/code-of-conduct. You can read up on that, but yeah, we appreciate everyone being here today, and let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, there we go. Sarah, first question. Netlify allows developers and businesses to publish modern web projects right from their Git repos, but bugs and slowdowns are unavoidable. How do you manage the errors in your code base? How do you mitigate risk? Otherwise, tell us about Sentry.
Yeah. Well, so we can kind of up level here. I mean, obviously, we're here to talk good things about Sentry and Netlify, and we will be for sure. But in general, I think this entire space of supporting, the release of web apps and really making that path, that developer journey from you're in your editor, you're pushing code to GitHub, wherever you're pushing code to, and you don't have to take time out of that experience to figure out, okay, now how do I get this published? How do I get this next release? And then similarly, once it is released, that complication of, oh no, there's a problem. Where do I even start trying to figure out this problem, right? Is this a performance issue? Is it an error? Is it just working on my machine? Like, it's just so complicated. And trying to improve that developer flow and that developer journey, I think, is really what we want to talk about here today. So, right, like what is Sentry? Sentry is really application monitoring, and you might have heard like application performance monitoring, APM. We like to say it's not even just in that bucket, right? We monitor errors and bugs. We have some features that I'll show you shortly around, so there's a bug. We think we know which commit that bug came from. And now you can just, if you have code owners set up in GitHub, easy, right? You just send it straight to them automatically through Slack or whatever, through PagerDuty, and try to resolve that as quickly as possible. Similarly with performance issues, right? Is there's a slowdown on a page. Where do you even start? Well, we actually have these suspect spans. Like what are the transactions, the calls back and forth between the server and client, whatever, like what are the ones that might be the ones that are causing the slowdown? And that can help you identify, like, oh, should I have actually cached this database request, the results from this? Or should I do like a two-phase loading, right? It's elevated beyond just, oh, this one call took a long time. So really what we're focused on is that. And when you combine that with Netlify, you just get something even stronger for teams, engineering teams that are, let's face it, we all are rapidly releasing as fast as possible, as good quality as possible. And when we hit that snag, we want to know immediately so that we can fix it. And so the beauty of kind of combining Sentry and Netlify's superpowers, if you will, is that Netlify will inform Sentry of like, hey, a release just happened. And now Sentry knows, okay, a release just happened. Great. Oh my gosh, there was a regression and it's related to this release. And now I know which code to go look in and what might have been the problem. So it just really is all about reducing the time to resolving issues so that it's not a matter of days or even weeks of engineers trying to figure it out, but literally minutes of identifying who on your engineering team is the right person, where in the code might be the problem, and giving you insights that will allow an engineer to say, hey, I really think this needs to be kind of a refactoring, or we need to rethink the way we're doing this. How do we identify poor performing API calls and, like I said, slow database queries? It's really about that. So whether you are an attendee of this webinar right now and you're a developer, hopefully this is reducing your headache of trying to find that. If you are an engineering leader or a higher up decision maker attending today, the benefit to this is not causing burnout on your engineering team, and also just reducing the time, like reducing downtime, reducing time where errors are showing up for your customers. So it's really kind of like the best of all worlds.
Yeah, that's the fact that you're not only like pointing to what release, but also making smart recommendations kind of along the way is super cool, and reinforces both of our value props of automation and just kind of like what you said, removing headaches.
Yeah.
So you can focus on the fun stuff. So and it sounds like we're going to do a little bit of a live demo, so I love that.
Yes.
We can check some of this out in real time. Cool. I mean, next question, what kind of differentiates Sentry, as I think about like other logging tools or more traditional methods that that developers use when they're trying to debug their code?
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but some things that I want to go into is, again, Sentry isn't just interested in logging errors or logging slowdowns, right? It is really more than that. It is enabling action as quickly as possible. And I think what is kind of important about Sentry is we're not trying to separate, what is a bug versus a slow API call necessarily, right? It is what is preventing your app from being the best quality as quickly as possible at all times. And I think that these integrations with Netlify, with GitHub, with, you know, whatever other tools are in your tech stack, is really what we're focused on. You might have seen some of our billboards or our like YouTube ads of Sentry can't fix this, right? And I think that that's kind of, you know, it's a funny way to say Sentry can't fix, you know, your cat walking on your keyboard, but it can fix, you know, like help you fix your performance and error issues. But beyond that, I think we understand as a company that we can't fix it all, which is why we work so hard to integrate with as many other developer tools as possible, because it really is about what is that entire ecosystem, what is the engineer trying to accomplish, and what kind of information do we have to make it easier for them to accomplish that quickly. So I think that's kind of part of it. We actually have, I'm going to do an unprompted just kind of plug here. We have a conference coming up at the end of September, DEX, for developer experience. And that is really the entire theme. It's to say, we cannot do this. We can't do it alone. And guess what? No company can, no engineering team can, no single person can, right? It really needs to be kind of this entire industry coming together and making sure that we work together to solve this.
You're bringing the village together.
Yeah. And then, you know, literally our goal is to lead you to the exact source. So whether it's those, you know, like those spans of transactions that are looking a little sus, right? And we call them suspect spans. It's you know, or whether it's the list of commits that might be the error, we call those suspect commits, right? It's what are these, how can we use the information we have, whether it's from, you know, a Netlify, our plugin for Netlify, and knowing that a release just happened, or GitHub's code owners and the commit, you know, history on Git. How can we leverage all of that information plus the information of how your application is running, and help you just get to that source as quickly as possible?
You mentioned those billboards I was in San Francisco last week, and you guys have like 3 or 4 of them, maybe more.
Yes.
Like I just
yes.
like I stopped counting. Like there, you guys kind of plastered the 101 there, and the one
yep, it's true.
With the woman in bed that dropped the phone, is dropping the phone on her face is a little bit funny.
Quick fun story here. When my daughter was first born and an infant, I may or may not have dropped the phone on her head. That is even worse. I think a lot of parents can relate though.
Yeah, it just slipped.
You know, you're tired, they're sitting on your lap, you just, it happens. Too bad Sentry can't fix it.
Yeah, too bad Sentry can't fix it, but we'll get close.
Yes.
Cool. You know, you talked a little bit about, you know, Sentry building an ecosystem, integrating as many apps as possible. Obviously, one of those is Netlify, which is one of the core apps for a developer as when they're building their site stores or web applications. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the Netlify integration, how it works, the benefits of it, so forth?
Yeah, definitely. So I talked a little bit about kind of what our aim was here, but yeah, like definitely want to kind of double click into that. I use corp lingo so often, non-ironically, and then I laugh at myself immediately afterwards. So let's double click. Deep dive, whatever we want to say. But really it is, you know, I think
it's the Microsoft in you. It's okay.
Oh my gosh, it is. The TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. It really is kind of this idea that what is one of the most stressful, exciting, you know, whatever word we want to use, moments for developers and an engineering team and a company. It is the moment of release, right? Whether you're releasing your first version, whether you're releasing, you know, just kind of an update, don't release on Fridays, right? Like we hear all these horror stories. And it's because you do as much as you possibly can before the release to find issues. You know, you've got testing environments, you've got, you know, dev what I meant like is that you've got tests in your developer environment, and then you've got, developer environments where you can like try things out. You try during stress testing for performance, but like there's only so much we can do, and there's only so much we can predict when it comes to the way humans are going to interact with our apps, right? I think it is much easier for engineers to predict where problems might come from with the actual code, but you might not anticipate that someone's going to click a button 700 times in a matter of a minute and totally have everything crash. And so really it's, if you've ever released code, it's that moment, that couple minutes, couple hours, couple days after the release where you're just like kind of on the edge of your seat, trying to figure out if something's going to blow up in your face. Maybe you're on call, maybe, whatever it is. And that's the moment that we're trying to reduce that stress and reduce that unknown and reduce that just lack of clarity into what's happening. So if you think about that, Netlify does an incredible job at making that release experience a seamless one, right? And so you're an engineer, you're using Netlify to release, your next version, and you send it off. And now with the Sentry plugin, you don't have to worry, because if there's a problem, Sentry will inform you immediately, and not just say, oh my gosh, there's a problem, but say, it's probably right here, like go check out this code, go check out these API calls, whatever it might be, so that you can confidently release with tools like Netlify, and know that that customer experience is remaining reliable and a good one. So with the plugin, Netlify automatically notifies Sentry of the new releases that are being deployed. It uploads source maps to Sentry so that we can understand, releases compared to code and things like that. And sends Sentry the commit SHA of head, meaning we want to know what commit was this release, where does this all start? So that if there is a new issue and it's related to a recent release, we might consider, reverting real quick if it's something major, or knowing that, oh, this was that new feature that was the issue. So it's really about just kind of informing Sentry about what's going on with the release, so that Sentry can be more actionable and informative to you as a developer.
And I just dropped in the link to the GitHub repository for the plugin. Go check it out, learn more, set it up, use it.
And yeah, actually, that's a good point. Just a reminder, Sentry is open source. We are completely open source. And so, yeah, the plugin is open source. All of Sentry is open source. Each of our framework supports and language supports are open source. So definitely go check it out and see if there's anything that, if you feel like it might be useful for you.
All right, rock on. You teased me with the live demo earlier. Now I'm excited. Can we jump in?
I know. Yeah.
So
it's nice to know that. Sorry for my. It's nice to know that from the poll, it seems like some folks. Awesome. I see we've got Lazar here in the chat asking, what info do we get when a crash happens, and is it possible to auto assign specific members of the team on where the error happened? Yes, let's talk about that right now. Because that, not all of you watching today are super familiar with Sentry. So let me just kind of show you around a little bit. I'm going to share my screen here. And this is a very real wink, wink company that I personally built this web app for, wink, wink. And I personally have, issues with it. For example, when I go to the products page, oh, darn it, I went to it earlier. Anyways, normally it's slow. You can tell this is totally a real wink, wink thing. But this is just kind of an application that we use to demonstrate some of the issues that we might have. So we can dive into it. When you head over to Sentry, you're presented with a list of projects, and or rather, you're given the option to create projects, but like if you already have things set up, this is kind of the view you'd get. And what's neat about this is if you have a bunch of different projects on a bunch of different, using a bunch of different frameworks and languages, no problem. We've got a kind of support for pretty much all of it. You get these overviews on your product page of how your applications are going, which is really great. And Lazar mentioned in the chat kind of, okay, so what actually happens here when a crash happens or when, there's a bug? This issues page here shows all of the exceptions, errors, everything that could possibly be a bug, and gives you kind of an overview of that. You can do it based off of individual projects. So if we wanted to only look at our JavaScript project, we could take a look at that. You can sort based on whether you were in your staging, your test environment, your production environment, over the last however long it's been. And you get information like, is this a regression? Have we seen this before? We thought we fixed it. Or is this just something completely new, right? And if we dive into it, this is what Lazar was asking in the Q&A. Yes, if you have code owners set up with GitHub or GitLab, you can automatically assign issues to the right people. So you can see right here, it says there are 5 commits that Sentry suspects are causing the issue. The top one up here is the one that is most likely, but we can see all of the other ones as well. We can view a full stack trace. We can get, all this additional information here. You can get information about which release this came from. And then you scroll down and you can see right here, this is the exact code that might be causing the problem. And you can literally just open that up in GitHub and start fixing it, right? Or at least start knowing where you're gonna make those changes. On this one in particular, we don't have the code owner set up, but in addition to things like code owners, you can also have alerts set up, which will alert a Slack channel or something on PagerDuty to make sure that if something happens in a particular part of your application, the right people know as soon as possible.
Do you have integration with like Jira or any Atlassian's tools or Zendesk or any type of support issue management tools that you can also?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As you can see here, issue tracking, here are all the different types of integrations that you can play around with. Honestly, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I just hit my 90 days. I still don't know all of the integrations Sentry has because we are so committed to, we need to make sure this works for any developer's environment, right? And it's important because like even showing this demo is not super useful if you're not building your app in JavaScript and making a web app, if you're instead doing a Unity game or making a mobile app, right? Like your environment's going to be completely different. And so yes, it is very important to kind of note all of the different types of integrations. And yeah, we have GitHub issues, we've got Jira issues, just kind of anything that you might need to improve the reduce the amount of time and stress around fixing issues. Alan in the chat was saying that they love the integrations, ClickUp and Slack in particular. Yeah, I think it's, I am obviously biased, but it is why I chose this company. So a couple of other things too, I just wanted to mention. We have, information about individual releases. So you can look across, a specific project and see the different releases, see that we've, this one's going through really well. The one before it also went through well. And if there's any kind of like issues that are happening, you can kind of just jump into, okay, what is actually going on related to this release? And that's why that integration with Netlify and knowing when a release is happening is so critical. And we also have some performance support. We've got an overview of kind of what's going on. You can have trends of what's happening. I mean, this one is only based on the last 24 hours. We can kind of look at the last 90 days and see, oh, you know what, there are these trends where that products page is becoming slower over the last 90 days, but these ones are becoming faster. So we can see those improvements. But I think sometimes even more exciting is looking into the actual transactions that are happening. And we can see here, for example, the products page was the one that usually is slow, but I just didn't actually have it slow this time. But you can see it's like 11.5 seconds, not milliseconds, but seconds, right? And that's an issue. And we show that with like this user misery bar, right? Users are not happy about this because it should not take 11 seconds for a web page to load. But when you jump into here, we show you, okay, you know what? This is kind of like what is going on, like how many customers are being affected at, you know, at what rates. And we also give you, hey, you know what? I think these might be the issues that you want to look into, right? These are the transaction spans, those API requests or database calls that seem to be the issues. And, you know, this one in particular, 10.5 seconds for this to happen, that might actually be the problem. And we can kind of dive into that and see like, what exactly does that mean and why and how, and yeah, so I think it's, when it comes to whether it's a bug or performance issue, again, our goal really is to just get you to knowing what the issue is as quickly as possible so that you can fix it as quickly as possible.
That little user misery widget, it aggregates kind of everything over time. It looks like at the top there, last 90 days.
Yes. So this one is our JavaScript application for all environments over the last 90 days. We're only looking at transaction durations that are less than 15 minutes because, you know, that is what's most relevant here. You can add additional kind of, you know, queries here, and what's great is you can actually see these trends and kind of see how things are going.
Yeah, that's cool because you can kind of actually fix things or re-architect things and so forth. And
Exactly.
You can kind of watch that, measure that over time.
Exactly. You know, it's actually been a while since we first released our Netlify Build plugin, but I would say like this blog post, if anyone is interested in learning more about it, just kind of talks about what we just said. But what I wanted to point out here is how easy it is. Because we talked about what the plugin does, right? Basically enabling Netlify to immediately inform us of a release and give us information related to that release so that we can better support the engineers if a problem happens related to that release. But it is actually so incredibly easy to just integrate. We've got, you know, this is just kind of that overview, but we've got lots of docs on it, and it's really just a matter of making sure that Sentry and Netlify know about each other. I think, you know, this is very cringe because that's the whole point of this webinar, but at the same time, like, I think our companies collectively have done a really good job of making sure that other dev tools, especially each other, can work well together to avoid some of those issues.
Super cool. Is there anything that anyone specifically wanted to see? I did drop that question, put Sarah on the spot. Any features or anything anyone's dying to see? Let us know. Or if you have any questions related to any of that we showed you, let us know that as well. But I have another question for you, Sarah. All
right.
Let's talk about web versus mobile, like the vitals. You know, how are these important? How should users monitor these metrics? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, we're really kind of dedicated to supporting engineering teams and developers building all kinds of applications. So like I said, whether you're building video games in Unity or even apps, you know, or building web applications or mobile applications, we want to make sure that we're supporting you through that. And one of the challenges with that is that things like or applications that are targeting different platforms might have different information and different concerns about performance or errors, right? So not only are they likely using different frameworks and languages and things like that, but even what customers are expecting from those experiences and what engineers are concerned about in each of those different targets varies. And so, you know, for the web, any kind of in-browser Sentry SDKs are going to collect the web vitals information. Everything from that is going to be like stored or kind of collected in our front end transactions view. Okay, sorry, I noticed my internet was starting to fluctuate a little bit. I wanted to make sure it was on the right network. And then, you know, I showed you a couple of those overviews of what performance looks like for your customers when you have a web application. And so we gather all of that web vital information as much as possible. And then we don't just kind of spit it out back to you, but rather create overviews of what might be common problems that you'd be seeing on that environment. This in particular, I'll share this real quick. Let me pull up a couple of tabs here. Cool. This URL is ridiculously long. And now I lost my chat, but regardless, I'll make sure. I think you mentioned it in the housekeeping, but we do send an email follow-up. So if anything that you see here, you know, you can obviously kind of rewatch, but we'll send some links about this stuff afterwards as well. But you know, we've got web vitals, which are not just random things that are happening, but actually kind of a set of vitals that we collectively as an industry are saying are important and that we need to pay attention to. And so we grab all of that information from that and are able to display it to you. Here we go. This is the picture that I was hoping to show in a way that is useful for you and knowing what your, for example, baseline is for your performance of your application in the web. How many transactions are like not hitting that well? How many are really, you know, doing well and exceeding that? And being able to deep dive into each of those. When you compare that to—
you guys have benchmarking data at all? Like you have aggregated, you know, some of these metrics across your entire customer base. You have 3 million, 4 million developers on Sentry. Are you guys surfacing any of that as like benchmark data so all the developers can kind of compare themselves?
That's a good question. I'm actually not positive if we do that. I think that this is totally me going like completely off script and just making things up on the fly. But I think that can somewhat be a challenge because each tech stack is going to be so different, and not only that, but like the type of application you're building is so different. So for example, we use Sentry to monitor Sentry. And when we were building some of these views, right, this is a lot of information. Even if you just look at the, you know, like this issues, or sorry, more so the performance page, right? This is a lot of information that we are gathering immediately to display like everything that you might need, right? And in just this transaction list, we have the actual transaction, which project it is, just like literally all this information. And we were finding that we had a slowdown with this. And it was because, or rather, it was because we were making a lot of calls to get all of this information. And so an opportunity for us was, okay, when a customer comes to this page, what do they need to know as quickly as possible? And what could be loaded like next that they won't really even notice is loading next, because they're looking at the thing that was loaded as quickly as possible. And so that we can call that two-phased loading or lazy loading, right? Which is, let me get the bare minimum of critical information displayed as fast as possible. And at the same time, I'll go fetch the other information and other data so that I can load that quickly, but it doesn't kind of limit the whole page from loading. And that may not be effective for other applications, right? You may not be able to implement lazy loading or two-phase loading if you're building something that like you need to have all of that information right away. And so you might have to approach that solution differently, and that benchmark might look different. It might be okay for someone to load, you know, you might be more okay with Netflix loading all of it and it taking a moment, compared to you know, if you're just kind of doing a quick Google search, you expect that to load faster. So I think that kind of introduces some trickiness there.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But yeah, I am curious now, so I'm gonna look into that for sure.
Yeah, there might be some way, again, just because at this point you guys have such a large data set of different applications, right? And data that it might be cool to surface some of that as, you know, allowing developers to benchmark their stuff.
Definitely. The other thing that's interesting is that something that I actually really appreciated, and one of the reasons I chose to join Sentry was we care a lot about privacy. And so as obviously we need to gather a lot of information so that we can surface that information for you and you can go off and make actionable changes. But at the same time, you know, we don't like, we want to make sure that we're always being extremely privacy conscious about anything that we do. So that would be the only other thing that I'm kind of curious about. Obviously, benchmarking is still possible to remain completely anonymous and just kind of gather that as an overview. But I am kind of curious, like how we treat that, because I'm not sure across different kind of customers. These are kind of, this is just a quick look at the difference between, we've got the, you know, the web vitals and the mobile vitals. And you can see that this is all under our docs in performance monitoring. So you can set stuff up, and then we've kind of separated the two. And really, we're just summarizing mobile performance issues, or not necessarily even issues, just like information with some graphs, and then jumping into the same kind of detailed level of transaction overview. So you can see that across different projects, but if you have like the same application, but one written for iOS, one written for Android, you can dive into those. You can, you know, sort between them. You don't have to look at all of them. You can see what is affecting customers as negatively, and you can jump into some of the details about this is an example of that warm start, lazy loading, two-phase loading, and how you might want to do that. So yeah, I mean, I think in general, you know, we're going to try to be as standard as possible in terms of wanting to make sure that we are able to surface the same information regardless of your tech stack and regardless of your target you know, type of application, but at the same time wanting to make sure that it is actually relevant to making improvements and keeping your apps healthy.
There is a question.
I see that. So is it possible to cross-link issues across different related projects? For example, a backend and front end. If not, what is the best way to have relational data for crashes across different related projects? Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, and basically you're just going to be using like the entire stack trace for that. So if there's an issue and it, you know, kind of gets kicked off in the front end because that's where someone clicked it, and then that's where the issue ends up kind of showing up. But the issue really is kind of in some kind of back end piece of your code, which is technically a different project. You can kind of go back and view that stack trace and keep digging deeper. And as long as both of your projects are there within Sentry, you can keep following that.
Cool. By the way, you guys have very nicely formatted support docs, right? With nicely
Yes.
pictures, menus and submenus, and so I
We
think
have an
a lot of respect there for
incredible docs
you're trying to
team.
find something. Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much. I think that's a benefit of also just being open source, right? Is like, you know, we care a lot about our documentation. Not that non-open source companies don't, but like, and if that's not enough, you just go to the repo, right? And you can open up an issue, you can go to the discussions tab, you can check out what the PRs are doing. And so they're like, whatever level of information you're looking for when you need support for Sentry is really available to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank
Yeah.
you, Docs team, for that. Let's talk about a couple customer examples. What are some real life examples out there in the wild of people using Sentry and Netlify together?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, two of these, hang on, I'm just gonna grab my tabs again. So these are a couple of examples that we wanted to share with you. One of them comes from our blog, the HTTP toolkit. So I don't know if y'all are familiar, but basically, I mean, it says it right here. With one click, intercept and view all of your HTTP mock endpoints or entire servers, rewrite, direct, or inject errors. So this is what that HTTP toolkit does. And you can read a little bit about this if you'd like. We'll send this information in our post event email. But really being able to, I think right here is this bit that is the most critical, which is needing to be able to catch errors immediately, debug and work out why they're happening, and confirm that the fixes will work. And so in this case, really understanding when certain checkout callbacks are happening, what kind of errors are being hit, and resolving that immediately. And I think all of us who build applications, especially for, you know, commerce, your checkout page cannot break. You cannot have a slow checkout page. You cannot have a customer click purchase and then not know if it's loading, crashing, did it charge me? Is it going to charge me? Right, that is not something that a commerce application can accept as a potential failure. And so that is what, you know, really focusing on and making sure that we can catch those and handle those. And what's great is it's just like a couple lines of code. And then similarly, Outfit 7, which is a completely different, you know, use case here, is this gaming company. And being able to just not just use Netlify to deploy changes quickly, but also set up those environments for testing. And as you saw with the Sentry quick demo, you can say, am I in my testing environment, my production environment, you know, which environment am I looking at? So when you are like, you cannot release a game where all of a sudden one of the pages, or, you know, you enter into a room or whatever the game is, and it just like crashes, right? It needs to be working. You can't break that flow. And so it's very, very important for companies, especially like Outfit 7, to have not only that trust in their release for both production and testing environments, but that trust that when and if there is an issue, I say when because come on, there will always be one, that you can fix it immediately. And I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but what I'm hoping for is that if you're watching this, whether live or later, that one of these types of just kind of like application types, if you will, like games versus commerce versus, you know, whatever it is resonating with you a little bit more. And you can kind of see the importance of why having Netlify and Sentry working so closely together for test environments, for production level environments, for releases and digging into that code. And just all of that is so critical to reduced stress success. I'm going to like make a sticker of that. I just made that up. Reduced stress success. Try to say that one time fast.
Or your next billboard.
There you go. I'll have to see if the rest of the team agrees. Reduce stress success, brought to you by Sentry. I noticed there was a question in the chat. Is the layout of vitals specific to a developer's side of work, so unique for developer within a project, or is it the same over an entire project? That's a great question. So it would be over the entire project. However, with things like code owners or having very specified alerts, if you are an individual developer, you can get those alerts for things that are only related to you, and you can create your own custom dashboard views. Let me try to find, where's my, okay. But you can actually create your own custom dashboard views to get information that is more relevant to just you. So yes and no, it will be over the entire project by default, but that's because, you know, oftentimes we need to see it across the entire project. But yes, you can very much have either custom alerts or custom dashboards that allow you to dive deeper into that is content more specifically related to you.
Cool.
I kind of want to show you something, Stephen.
Show me.
Like,
I'm excited.
So, okay, you know, like I said, I've given kind of a couple of examples of how you might want to use Netlify and Sentry. And this, you know, it's not going to be necessarily a live demo, but I just want to show you literally how easy it is before we end this to configure Sentry with Netlify. Like, I need to stress this. We have worked hard together, not necessarily us personally, but the companies we represent, our teams, our friends have worked really hard together to make sure that this experience is one that is seamless and easy. And literally all you've got to do is head over to Netlify, go to the plugins page, search for the Sentry plugin, decide some basic information about it, set up your environment variables, make sure your SDK is configured. It's like too easy, right? You want to connect your Netlify functions to Sentry to start reporting errors. Create a Sentry account, create a project, and set your Sentry DSN variable in your Netlify build plugin, right? It's too easy. It's literally like a couple of lines of code, and making sure that Sentry knows about Netlify, Netlify knows about Sentry. Like it's that simple.
And then just watch all the errors come rolling in.
So I know a lot of you here today are, you know, already Netlify users and fans, and definitely don't blame you. I am also. So if you want to check this out, literally just add in the plugin. There's docs. There's a lot of information to help guide you because it is really this simple. And you can just start seeing things come in. Even if you're not necessarily ready to change your whole dev team to using this, just seeing if it's even useful and kind of what information helps affect your day-to-day. So I just kind of wanted to plug that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great way to get started and as a next step. But definitely reach out to us. Here's our contact information. You can reach out to us directly if you have any additional questions or would like to talk about any specific use cases. We would love to hear from you. If you are using the integration today, the plugin, you have any feedback, please let us know.
Definitely.
And with that, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Dr. G,
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today.
You know, I've got the LinkedIn there. I am literally Dr. Guthals on all social media, so feel free to reach out. Feel free to join Sentry on our open source repos, on our Discord, kind of everywhere. And yes, there is a recorded version. If you've registered, which you have since you're here, I believe an email will be sent out to you all with links and the recording.
Cool. Thank you so much. Have a good
Thank you, everyone.
week.
Thank you, Stephen.
See ya.